On May 21st, 1776, in the small Bavarian town of Ingolstadt, an event took place whose consequences are still felt by historians today. Professor Adam Weishaupt gathered 5 like-minded individuals and founded a secret order that would go down in history as the Illuminati. Was it a utopian experiment by enlightened thinkers, or a real attempt to change the face of Europe? How did a small group of university intellectuals manage to frighten kings and popes? And how did their ideas come to fruition in the European Union 200 years later? Today, we will reveal the true story of the order that wanted to unite the continent through the power of the mind. Subscribe to the channel to learn more true stories about secret societies and their influence on world politics. And be sure to share in the comments whether you think the Illuminati's ideas about a united European state were utopian or prophetic. Your opinion is very important for the development of the channel. The 18th century was a time of radical change and crisis that swept across the European continent. During this period, the old order, based on absolute monarchy, the dominance of the church, and a strict hierarchy, was cracking under the pressure of new ideas. The magnificent palaces of kings and the theses of spiritual rulers were confronted with a flood of questions. Why is irrevocable power necessary? Why does the church interfere in civil affairs? What is human freedom? And what are the rights of man? By birth? In Paris, London, Berlin, and Vienna, a class of educated people grew up who tried to challenge the status quo. Their growing discontent gave rise to the Enlightenment, a movement of thought focused on knowledge, science, and critical reflection, rather than blind obedience to authority. Philosophers and scientists, Voltaire, Rousseau, Diderot, Spinoza, wrote works that challenged the dogmas of millennia. A desire for change grew in the hearts of an increasing number of townspeople and even aristocrats. It was no longer just about religious liberation, but about a complete reform of the state. The streets were filled with students, minor officials, artisans, and aristocrats dissatisfied with poverty and the lack of social mobility. Europe was divided into many kingdoms and principalities. The Holy Roman Empire of the German nation, France, Spain, England, Portugal, Sweden, Poland, and dozens of small states, each living under its own laws and ruled by a ruling dynasty. The slightest sign of free thought was often punished with torture, burning at the stake, or exile. New ideas spread through books, philosophical letters, and secret circles in coffee houses and salons, despite censorship and surveillance. The leading role here belonged to universities, true bastions of enlightenment, where the future of Europe and humanity was debated. Bavaria, with its center in Ingolstadt, occupied a special place. It was a region with strong Catholic traditions, strict church control, and a centuries-old system of restrictions. However, it was here, in the gloomy university atmosphere, that a new experiment began to take shape. The creation of a society that sought to free people from dogma and build a new world based on reason rather than tradition. It was here that the Illuminati appeared on the historical stage. We are on the threshold of an era when outdated orders and the energy of a new era collide. In these conditions, not only was the spirit of change born, but also an acute need for unity, for a new social contract between man and power. Ordinary students, priests, retired officers, and philosophers became the bearers of change, sometimes without even realizing it. The times themselves demanded new answers to old questions. What is truth? Who should decide the fate of Europe? Perhaps in the unity of its diverse cultures. All this threatened the existing order, and an era of secret societies, conspiracies, new alliances, and dangers was looming. It is not surprising that it was then, in the shadows of university buildings and quiet offices, that an order was born whose history still provokes heated debate among historians and ordinary people alike. What was the Illuminati movement itself? What was its purpose? And why did it originate in the heart of Old Bavaria? This will be discussed in the next chapter. On May 1st, 1776, in the small university town of Ingolstadt, an event took place whose significance was not understood at the time, even by those who participated in it. On that day, 32-year-old professor of canon law, Adam Weishaupt, gathered a small group of like-minded people in his home. Thus began the history of an order that would go down in history as the Bavarian Illuminati. Weishaupt did not plan to create a global movement or a secret society capable of shaking the foundations of the European order. His goal was much more modest: to bring together a few educated people who were willing to discuss forbidden topics, away from the ears of the church authorities and state censorship. Only 5 people attended the first meeting: the founder himself and 4 of his students from the university. The name Illuminati did not immediately stick to the society. Weishaupt originally called his organization the Order of the Perfect, a term intended to emphasize the participants' desire for self-education and moral development. However, within a few months, the Latin word Illuminati, enlightened ones, became established, which more accurately reflected the essence of the movement. The idea of creating a secret society did not come out of nowhere for Weishaupt. He had long studied the structure and methods of the Jesuit order, Masonic lodges, and other secret organizations of the time. The professor understood that in order to spread new ideas under strict censorship, conspiracy, strict discipline, and gradual initiation of members into the true goals of the society were necessary. The first months of the order's existence were spent discussing its basic principles and developing its charter. Weishaupt demanded absolute secrecy from participants, the use of pseudonyms, and encrypted correspondence. Each new member underwent a thorough screening and took a solemn oath to keep the organization's secrets. Violation of the oath was punishable by expulsion and, according to some sources, more serious consequences. Early documents of the order indicate that von Weishaupt planned from the outset to create not just a discussion club, but an active organization capable of influencing social processes. In letters to his associates, he wrote about the need to infiltrate government institutions, universities, and church structures. The goal was clear: to change Europe from within, gradually replacing the old order with a new one based on reason and science. The first year of the order's existence revealed both its strengths and weaknesses. On the one hand, strict secrecy allowed the most radical ideas to be discussed without fear of persecution. On the other hand, its small size and limitation to a single university town made the organization's influence negligible. Weishaupt understood that in order to realize his ambitious plans, it was necessary to expand, attract new people, and establish branches in other cities and countries. The founder of the order paid particular attention to the ideological training of its members. Newcomers received a list of required reading, which included works by Voltaire, Rousseau, and other philosophers of the Enlightenment. Lectures on history, philosophy, and natural sciences were held regularly. Weishaupt sought to educate not just supporters of his views, but thinking people capable of independently analyzing reality and making decisions. By the end of its first year, the order already had about 20 members. They were mainly students and young teachers from the University of Ingolstadt, as well as several local government officials. The modest undertaking of a professor of canon law was beginning to take on the characteristics of a serious organization with far-reaching plans. However, the real rise of the order was still ahead. The fate of the Illuminati would change dramatically when influential aristocrats and famous cultural figures joined their ranks. But more about that in the next chapters of our story. To understand the nature of the Illuminati movement, it is necessary to take a closer look at the personality of its founder. Adam Weishaupt was born on February 6, 1748, in Ingolstadt, into the family of law professor Johann Georg Weishaupt. The death of his father when the boy was only 7 years old radically changed his fate. The young Adam's guardian became Baron Johann Adam von Eichstätt, an educated aristocrat, supporter of the ideas of the Enlightenment, and critic of the influence of the Church on education. It was von Eichstätt who introduced his ward to the works of French philosophers, taught him to think critically and not to accept the dogmas of the Catholic Church at face value. Under the influence of his guardian, the young Weishaupt became fascinated with ancient philosophy, especially the works of Plato and Aristotle, as well as contemporary writings on natural law and political theory. In 1768, at the age of 20, Weishaupt received his doctorate in law and began teaching at his alma mater. His lectures on canon law quickly gained popularity among students thanks to his unusual approach. Instead of mechanically memorizing church precepts, the professor encouraged their critical analysis and comparison with the principles of natural law and common sense. Conflict with the university administration and influential Jesuits was inevitable. Weishaupt was repeatedly called on the carpet, asked to change his teaching methods, and threatened with dismissal. However, the young professor did not give up. On the contrary, the persecution only strengthened his conviction of the need to fight against ecclesiastical obscurantism and to create a secret organization of like-minded people. Weishaupt's intellectual development was influenced by several key sources. First, there were the works of French encyclopedists, Diderot, d'Alembert, Voltaire, who promoted the supremacy of reason over tradition and superstition. Second, the works of German philosophers, especially Christian Thomasius and Christian Wolff, who developed theories of natural law. Third, the writings of English thinkers John Locke and David Hume, who justified the principles of religious tolerance and the limitation of state power. Utopian projects of an ideal society had a particular influence on the formation of the future founder of the order's worldview. Weishaupt carefully studied Thomas More's Utopia, Tommaso Campanella's The City of the Sun, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau's works on the natural state of man and the social contract. These ideas formed the basis of his own program for the transformation of society. By the age of 30, Weishaupt had developed into a mature thinker with a clear system of views. He believed in the possibility of creating a just society based on reason, equality, and brotherhood. The church and the monarchy seemed to him to be the main obstacles to this goal. The professor dreamed of a united Europe where there would be no place for religious intolerance, class privileges, or despotic power. However, Weishaupt understood that openly preaching such ideas in Catholic Bavaria was tantamount to suicide. Careful, step-by-step work was needed to change public consciousness. This gave rise to the idea of creating a secret order that would operate on the principle of a silent revolution, gradually penetrating all spheres of public life and imperceptibly changing them from within. Weishaupt was a controversial figure. On the one hand, he was a sincere idealist who dreamed of a better world. On the other hand, he was a practical organizer who did not shy away from intrigue, deception, and even blackmail to achieve his goals. His contemporaries noted his outstanding oratory skills and his ability to persuade and recruit new supporters. At the same time, many pointed to his lust for power, intolerance of criticism, and desire for absolute control over the order's activities. The family life of the founder of the Illuminati was also difficult. In 1775, he married Christine Stockhammer, but the marriage was unsuccessful. Weishaupt soon became infatuated with a young widow, and after his wife's death, he married her, causing a scandal in the conservative circles of Ingolstadt. The creation of the Illuminati became the main focus of Weishaupt's life. This project embodied all his philosophical beliefs, political ambitions, and organizational skills. However, fate decreed that the creator would not be able to bring his brainchild to triumph. From the very beginning, the Order of the Illuminati was built on a strict hierarchy borrowed from the Jesuits and Masonic lodges. Weishaupt understood that in order to operate effectively in conditions of political and religious persecution, iron discipline, absolute secrecy, and the gradual initiation of members into the true goals of the organization were necessary. The structure of the order became increasingly complex and refined throughout its existence. Initially, the system included only 3 degrees: novice, minerval, and Illuminati. A novice is a candidate undergoing a probationary period and studying the basics of the order's philosophy. A minerval is a full member who has gained access to the inner workings of the organization but has not yet been initiated into its highest secrets. An Illuminate was an experienced member who was trusted to lead local groups and recruit new followers. As the order grew, its structure became more complex. By the end of the 1770s, there were already 13 degrees, divided into 3 classes: preparatory, Masonic, and mystical. Each class had its own characteristics, rituals, and levels of initiation into the secrets of the organization. The preparatory class included 4 degrees: novice, Minerva, junior Illuminati, and senior Illuminati. At this level, novices studied the basics of Enlightenment philosophy, developed critical thinking, and learned to analyze contemporary political and social problems. Particular attention was paid to moral and ethical education. Members of the order were supposed to become models of virtue, honesty, and selfless service to the public good. The Masonic class consisted of 3 degrees corresponding to traditional Masonic initiations: apprentice, journeyman, and master. This level was introduced after the Illuminati infiltrated Masonic lodges and served as a kind of bridge between the 2 organizations. Here, the symbols, allegories, and rituals of the Freemasons were studied, but in an interpretation that corresponded to the goals of the order. The highest mystical class united 6 degrees: junior priest, regent, master, king or national leader, magician, and man-king. At this level, members of the order gained access to the organization's most secret plans, including its strategy for infiltrating state and church structures, methods of influencing public opinion, and ultimate goals for transforming European society. Each degree had its own distinctive signs, passwords, and means of identification. New members were given symbolic names, most often borrowed from ancient history or mythology. Weishaupt himself went by the pseudonym Spartacus in honor of the leader of the slave revolt against the Roman Empire. This symbolism was meant to emphasize the revolutionary nature of the movement and its struggle against tyranny. The initiation rituals were solemn and mysterious to varying degrees. Candidates underwent symbolic trials, took oaths of allegiance to the order, and received new knowledge about the structure and goals of the organization. Particular importance was attached to psychological influence. Semi-darkness, flickering candles, ancient symbols, solemn music. All this was intended to make a deep impression on the initiate and strengthen his loyalty to the Brotherhood. The order's management system was centralized and authoritarian. At the head stood the general of the order, the Weishaupt, who had unlimited power over all members and divisions. He was subordinate to national inspectors, who were responsible for the order's activities in various countries and regions. The next level consisted of provincial chiefs, who directed the work in individual cities or regions. The so-called invisible leaders played a special role. These were the highest leaders of the order, whose names were known only to a small circle of initiates. This system was intended to ensure the security of the organization. Even in the event of exposure and arrests of ordinary members, the true leaders remained in the shadows and could continue their activities. The order was financed by membership fees, the amount of which depended on the financial situation of the member. Wealthy aristocrats and merchants paid significant sums, while students and minor officials made symbolic payments. Part of the funds went to maintain the headquarters, publish literature, and support members in need, but the bulk of the money was used to finance intelligence activities and bribe influential figures. The reporting and control system was carefully designed. Each member of the order had to report regularly to their superiors on their activities, successes in recruiting new supporters, and information obtained about political and social processes. Particular attention was paid to gathering compromising material on influential figures. This information could be used to coerce them into cooperation or neutralize opponents. The ideology of the Bavarian Illuminati was a complex mixture of philosophical, political, and social concepts of the Enlightenment, adapted to the specific conditions of 18th century Central Europe. At the heart of their doctrine was the belief that humanity was in a state of decline due to the dominance of superstition, despotism, and social injustice, but could be saved through education, reason, and gradual reform. The central element of the doctrine was the cult of reason with a capital R. The Illuminati believed that the human mind was the only reliable source of true knowledge and just laws. Religious dogma, monarchical traditions, and class privileges were all to give way to rational analysis and a scientific approach to the organization of social life. Weishaupt and his followers saw themselves as the heirs of ancient philosophers and contemporary encyclopedists in the cause of liberating humanity from the shackles of ignorance. The order's religious views were radical for their time. Officially, the Illuminati did not deny the existence of God, but interpreted him in the spirit of deism, as an impersonal creative force that created the world and established natural laws, but did not interfere in the daily lives of people. This concept excluded the need for the Church as a mediator between man and God, rejected the dogma of the divine origin of royal power, and paved the way for the secularization of society. Christianity, as interpreted by the Illuminati, was seen as a distortion of the original teachings of Jesus, which had been used by priests to establish their dominance over the ignorant masses. True Christianity, in their opinion, called for equality, brotherhood, and justice, but these ideas were distorted by the church hierarchy in order to preserve its own power and wealth. The order's political doctrine was no less radical. The Illuminati rejected the principle of the divine right of kings and insisted that power should come from the people and serve the public good. Monarchy as a form of government seemed to them outdated and unjust. One person cannot have unlimited power over millions of subjects solely by right of birth. The Illuminati considered a republic based on the principles of natural equality of people, separation of powers, and the rule of law to be the ideal social order. However, they understood that the immediate overthrow of monarchies would lead to chaos and bloodshed. Therefore, they proposed a gradual transition to a new system through the education of rulers, legislative reforms, and a change in public consciousness. The order's social program called for the elimination of class privileges and the creation of a society where a person's position would be determined by their abilities and merits, not their origin. The Illuminati advocated equality before the law, freedom of conscience and speech, the right to education, and the fair distribution of public goods. A special place in the doctrine was occupied by the idea of cosmopolitanism, the overcoming of national and state borders in the name of the unity of the human race. The Illuminati dreamed of creating a world republic of wise and enlightened people that would put an end to wars, religious strife, and social injustice. This utopian goal served as the ideological basis for the creation of an international network of secret societies. The economic views of the order were influenced by physiocrats and early liberal theorists. The Illuminati advocated free trade, the restriction of guild privileges, and the development of industry and agriculture based on scientific knowledge. However, they also criticized the extremes of wealth and poverty, proposing a moderate redistribution of property for the public good. Pedagogical principles played a key role in the order's program. The Illuminati believed that people could be changed through proper upbringing and education. They advocated the creation of a system of universal secular education based on the study of natural sciences, history, and philosophy, instead of scholastic disciplines and religious catechism. The methods used to achieve their goals were varied but always cautious. The Illuminati avoided open revolutionary actions, preferring the tactic of gradual infiltration into all spheres of public life. They sought to occupy key positions in universities, courts, and administrative institutions in order to subtly influence important decisions and shape public opinion. The ultimate goal of all the order's activities was to create a new world order based on reason, justice, and brotherhood among all people, regardless of their nationality, social origin, or religious beliefs. This goal seemed utopian to their contemporaries, but many of its elements would find expression in the centuries that followed. By the end of the 1770s, the Bavarian Illuminati was experiencing a period of rapid growth that transformed a modest university society into an influential international organization. Several factors contributed to this: skillful propaganda of the ideas of the Enlightenment, the attraction of wealthy and educated people, and the general crisis of traditional institutions of power in Europe at that time. The first significant success came in 1777, when law student Franz Xaver von Zwack joined the order. The young man came from a noble Bavarian family and had connections in aristocratic circles, which gave the Illuminati access to high society. Zwick, who received the name Caton in the order, became one of the most active recruiters and soon headed the Munich branch of the organization. However, the real turning point came a year later, when Baron Adolf von Knigge, a charismatic aristocrat, experienced Freemason, and talented organizer, joined the movement. Knigge, who took the pseudonym Philo, had extensive connections in Masonic lodges throughout Germany, and was able to use them to spread the influence of the Illuminati far beyond Bavaria. Under Nigge's leadership, a new expansion strategy was developed based on infiltrating existing Masonic lodges and gradually converting their members to their faith. This approach proved extremely effective. By 1780, the Illuminati controlled or had a strong influence in lodges in Munich, Freising, Eichstätt, Ingolstadt, and other Bavarian cities. Their success in Bavaria allowed them to begin expanding their activities throughout the Holy Roman Empire. In 1780, branches were established in Frankfurt, am Main, Mannheim, and Strasbourg. A year later, the order penetrated Austria, where its members included several courtiers and high-ranking officials of the Viennese government. The establishment of a branch in Weimar, the cultural capital of the German lands, was particularly important. Here, such prominent figures as the poet Johann Wolfgang von Goethe and the philosopher Johann Gottfried Herder joined the ranks of the Illuminati. Their participation in the movement gave it intellectual respectability and attracted the attention of educated circles throughout Europe. The social composition of the order during its heyday was quite diverse, but representatives of the educated classes predominated. Among the Illuminati were university professors, doctors, lawyers, writers, artists, officers, middle-ranking officials, and even some members of the clergy who had become disillusioned with the official church. Aristocrats were in the minority, but it was they who provided financial support and political cover for the organization's activities. By 1782, the order had grown to about 2,000 members, distributed among 70 branches in various parts of Germany, Austria, and neighboring countries. These were impressive figures for a secret organization operating under strict censorship and police surveillance. The order's financial situation also improved significantly thanks to contributions from wealthy members. Baron Nigg personally donated a large sum to the development of the organization, and his connections in commercial and banking circles provided additional sources of funding. The money was spent on maintaining headquarters, publishing literature, supporting members in need, and, most importantly, creating an extensive network of agents. Agent activity became one of the main areas of work for the order during its heyday. The Illuminati sought to infiltrate all key institutions of society: government agencies, courts, universities, the church, the army, and Masonic lodges of other orientations. Particular attention was paid to gathering information about the political plans of governments, the personal lives of influential figures, and internal conflicts in ruling circles. Literary activity also played an important role in promoting the ideas of the order. The Illuminati published magazines and brochures, translated the works of French philosophers into German, and financed the publication of books by their like-minded colleagues. Works criticizing church obscurantism, class privileges, and absolutist forms of government were particularly popular. The order's international connections also expanded. Contacts were established with enlightened thinkers in France, liberal politicians in England, and reformers in the Netherlands. Plans were discussed to establish branches in Paris, London, Amsterdam, and other European capitals. The Illuminati dreamed of creating a pan-European network of like-minded people capable of coordinating their influence on the politics of various countries. However, along with their successes, problems also grew. Rapid expansion made it difficult to control local branches, and new members included random people and even agents of opponents. Conflicts arose between different factions within the order, especially between supporters of Weishaupt and Knigge, on questions of strategy and tactics. External threats also intensified. Church authorities and governments became increasingly suspicious of the activities of secret societies. There was a storm brewing that would soon hit the order with full force. The relationship between the Illuminati and Masonic lodges is one of the most complex and controversial chapters in the history of secret societies in the 18th century. On the one hand, Freemasonry served as a convenient cover for the Illuminati's activities and a source of new members. On the other hand, ideological differences between the two organizations inevitably led to conflicts and mutual distrust. By the time the Illuminati was founded, Masonic lodges already had a century and a half of history and enjoyed a certain degree of legality in most European countries. Officially, they were engaged in charity work, moral self-improvement of their members, and the study of ancient mystical traditions. However, in reality, many lodges served as meeting places for people dissatisfied with the existing order and for discussing political issues. Baron Nigg, who had many years of experience in Masonic activities, proposed using the existing structure of lodges to spread the influence of the Illuminati. His plan was to gradually infiltrate the order's activists into the governing bodies of Masonic organizations and convert the most capable Masons to their faith. Outwardly, the Masonic lodges would continue to function as before, but in reality, they would serve the interests of the Illuminati. The first attempts at infiltration proved successful. In Munich, the local Masonic lodge, To the Three Lights, was almost completely under the influence of the Illuminati by 1779. A similar situation developed in the lodges of Ingolstadt, Freising, and other Bavarian cities. Freemasons, attracted by the radical ideas of the Enlightenment, willingly joined the ranks of the more revolutionary organization. However, the process of infiltration into Freemasonry was not one-sided. The Illuminati, in turn, borrowed many organizational principles, rituals, and symbols from their predecessors. The system of degrees of initiation, the use of pseudonyms, and complex initiation ceremonies were all adapted from Masonic practice and tailored to the needs of the new order. The Masonic influence became particularly strong after the reform of the Illuminati structure carried out by Nigg in 1780. An entire Masonic class consisting of 3 traditional degrees was included in the organizational structure of the order: apprentice, fellow, and master. This innovation was intended to facilitate the transition of Freemasons into the ranks of the Illuminati and create the appearance of continuity between the two traditions. The ideological differences between Freemasonry and Illuminism were quite significant. Traditional Freemasonry, especially of the English type, held moderate political views and avoided direct interference in state affairs. Masons professed loyalty to the existing authorities and limited themselves to working on the moral improvement of the individual. Religious issues were also handled with caution. Freemasonry required its members to believe in the great architect of the universe, but did not engage in theological disputes. The Illuminati, on the contrary, set political goals for themselves from the very beginning and did not hide their radicalism. They openly criticized the monarchical system, advocated the secularization of society, and dreamed of republican forms of government. In religious matters, their position was close to deism or even atheism, which shocked many traditional Freemasons. These contradictions inevitably led to conflict. As the Illuminati's influence among Freemasons grew, disputes arose over the goals and methods of the secret societies. Conservative Freemasons accused the Illuminati of radicalism and of seeking to use Masonic lodges for political purposes. The Illuminati, in turn, criticized traditional Freemasonry for passivity and unwillingness to fight social injustice. A particularly acute conflict erupted in 1782 at a Masonic convention in Wilhelmsbad, where representatives of lodges from various European countries gathered. The Illuminati attempted to seize control of the overall leadership of the Masonic movement, but met with fierce resistance from other factions. The convention ended with a compromise that effectively cemented the split in the Masonic movement. After the Wilhelmsbad Convention, relations between the Illuminati and traditional Freemasons continued to deteriorate. Many lodges began to expel well-known supporters of Weishaupt from their ranks, while the Illuminati, in turn, created their own pseudo-Masonic organizations that were not formally associated with traditional Freemasonry. The use of a Masonic cover had both advantages and disadvantages for the Illuminati. On the one hand, it allowed them to avoid suspicion from the authorities and attract new members from among respected citizens. On the other hand, their connection to Freemasonry made the Illuminati vulnerable to criticism from the Church and conservative politicians, who traditionally viewed the Freemasons with suspicion. Paradoxically, it was precisely the Masonic connections that contributed to both the rise and fall of the Illuminati. Infiltrating the lodges ensured the rapid spread of the organization's influence, but at the same time created many enemies among traditional Freemasons, who subsequently provided the authorities with compromising information about the activities of the Radical Order. By the early 1780s, the leadership of the Illuminati had shifted from local tasks to grandiose plans to transform the whole of Europe. Secret documents of the organization, later discovered by the Bavarian authorities, contained detailed plans for the creation of a unified European state based on the principles of reason, equality, and brotherhood of nations. These plans, utopian in nature, nevertheless reflected the serious intentions of the movement's leaders. The Illuminati's concept of a united Europe was based on criticism of the existing system of nation-states, which, in their opinion, gave rise to endless wars, trade conflicts, and cultural isolation of peoples. Weisgartner and his associates saw the fragmentation of the continent as the main cause of backwardness, poverty, and political despotism. Only the creation of a supranational union could, in their view, ensure peace, prosperity, and progress for all Europeans. The project for a future European state envisaged the abolition of monarchies and their replacement by a republican form of government. At the head of a united Europe was to be an elected council of wise men, enlightened individuals selected not on the basis of their origin or wealth, but on the basis of their knowledge, virtues, and devotion to the common good. This council would have broad powers in the areas of legislation, foreign policy, and coordination of economic development in various regions. The Illuminati's plans paid particular attention to the religious question. They proposed the complete separation of church and state and the establishment of the principle of religious tolerance. The Catholic Church, as the most influential and conservative religious organization, was to lose its political privileges and limit itself exclusively to spiritual activities. In place of the Christian tradition, a cult of reason and natural religion based on a scientific understanding of the universe was proposed. The economic program of unification included the creation of a pan-European market without customs barriers and trade restrictions. The Illuminati advocated the free movement of goods, capital, and people across the continent, which was supposed to promote prosperity and mutual enrichment of peoples. It also envisaged the unification of measures, weights, and the monetary system to facilitate trade. The cultural policy of the future European state envisaged the preservation of national characteristics while creating a pan-European system of education and science. Latin was to become the means of international communication among the educated classes, while national languages would be preserved for everyday use. There were plans to create a network of universities where students from different countries could receive the same quality education. The military doctrine of a united Europe was based on the principle of collective security. National armies were to be disbanded and replaced by a single European armed force that would serve exclusively for defensive purposes. Aggressive wars were outlawed, and conflicts between European nations were to be resolved through negotiation and arbitration. The practical implementation of these plans was conceived as a long process, stretching over several generations. The first stage was to be the creation of a secret network of like-minded people in all European capitals. These people, occupying key positions in government institutions, universities, the army, and the church, would gradually prepare public opinion for the need for radical change. The second stage envisaged coordinated reforms in various countries aimed at weakening monarchical power and strengthening the role of enlightened elites in the government. These reforms were to be carried out cautiously, without revolutionary upheavals, so as not to provoke resistance from conservative forces and damage the authority of the movement itself. The final stage envisaged the voluntary unification of the reformed European states into a single union based on mutually beneficial agreements. The Illuminati believed that once the peoples were convinced of the advantages of peace, free trade, and cultural exchange, they would themselves demand that their governments participate in a pan-European project. A ramified system of international connections was created to coordinate activities in various countries. Agents of the order established contacts with enlightened thinkers, liberal politicians, and discontented aristocrats in Paris, London, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Stockholm, and other European capitals. Particular hopes were pinned on France, where the ideas of the Enlightenment were widely popular among the educated classes. Financing international activities required considerable funds, which came from wealthy members of the order and sympathetic bankers. The money was spent on maintaining agents, organizing secret meetings, and publishing and distributing propaganda literature. Special funds were created to support promising politicians and scientists who shared the ideals of the order. The ambition of the Illuminati's European plans amazed even their contemporaries. Critics accused the order of utopianism and detachment from reality, pointing to the profound differences between European peoples in language, culture, economic development, and political traditions. However, history has shown that many of the ideas of the Bavarian conspirators proved prophetic and would find expression in later eras. As the influence and spread of radical ideas grew, the Illuminati inevitably gained more and more powerful enemies. The Catholic Church and European monarchs, sensing a threat to their traditional positions, launched a coordinated campaign to expose and suppress the activities of the secret society. This struggle took on the character of a real war between the forces of the old and new worlds, the outcome of which determined the fate not only of the Illuminati themselves, but of the entire Enlightenment movement in Europe. The Catholic Church was the first to recognize the danger posed by the order. Jesuit informants in universities reported growing anti-clerical sentiments among students and professors, and intercepted correspondence between members of the secret society contained direct calls for the secularization of society and the elimination of church privileges. The papal curia in Rome received alarming reports from bishops in various countries about the subversive activities of the Illuminati among the clergy and laity. The Jesuits played a particularly active role in the fight against the order, seeing the Illuminati as direct ideological opponents and competitors. in the field of education and influence on the political elite. After the dissolution of the Society of Jesus in 1773, many former Jesuits remained in universities and church institutions, retaining their organization and devotion to Catholic ideals. It was they who became the main exposers of the secret activities of the Illuminati. The first serious measures against the order were taken in Bavaria, the birthplace of the movement. Elector Karl Theodor, who was initially liberal-minded and even sympathetic to the ideas of the Enlightenment, gradually changed his position under pressure from church hierarchs and conservative advisors. In 1780, the first decree banning secret societies was issued, which did not formally mention the Illuminati, but was clearly directed against them. However, the real campaign of persecution began after compromising documents of the order fell into the hands of the Bavarian authorities. In 1784, a former member of the organization, Joseph Utschneider, who had been expelled for financial irregularities, provided the government with detailed information about the structure, plans, and members of the secret society. His testimony was confirmed by another defector, Kosianch Zwak, a relative of one of the leaders of the order. The information received shocked the Bavarian government. It turned out that the Illuminati had infiltrated state institutions, courts, universities, and even the entourage of the elector himself. Among the members of the order were high-ranking officials, judges, professors, and officers. The authorities were particularly outraged by plans to overthrow the monarchy and establish a republican system, as well as calls for the confiscation of church lands and the liquidation of monasteries. On June 22, 1784, Elector Karl Theodor issued a special edict banning the Illuminati. The document declared the organization hostile to the state and religion, and its members were ordered to immediately cease all activities under threat of severe punishment. At the same time, mass searches of the homes of suspects began. Documents were confiscated, and leaders were arrested. Weishaupt himself, warned by friends about the impending repression, managed to escape to neighboring Thuringia, where he was given refuge by Duke Ernst of Gotha, who secretly sympathized with the ideas of the Enlightenment. However, many other leaders of the order were arrested and interrogated. Baron Nig formally broke with the Illuminati a year before the persecution began, but he too was persecuted and forced to publicly renounce his former beliefs. The repression in Bavaria was a signal to the authorities of other German states. In Austria, Emperor Joseph II, despite his reputation as an enlightened monarch, also banned secret societies and ordered the closure of suspicious Masonic lodges. Similar measures were taken in Prussia, Saxony, and other German principalities. The Church used the defeat of the Illuminati to launch a broader offensive against the ideas of the Enlightenment. Sermons against the philosophy of reason, natural law, and religious tolerance were preached from church pulpits. The works of Voltaire, Rousseau, and Diderot were added to the index of banned books. Control over university education was tightened, and many professors with liberal views were dismissed or forced into silence. The international campaign against the Illuminati reached its peak after the publication in 1797 of the book Memoirs on the History of Jacobinism by the French abbot Augustin Barrel. The author claimed that the Illuminati had organized the French Revolution and continued to operate under various guises, threatening all the monarchies of Europe. Although these accusations were greatly exaggerated, they found widespread support among conservative politicians and church leaders. Opponents of the order used not only administrative and police measures, but also a powerful propaganda campaign. Books and pamphlets were published exposing the devilish plans of the Illuminati, their allegedly satanic rituals, and their desire to destroy Christian civilization. Many of these accusations were fantastical, but they shaped negative attitudes toward secret societies among broad sections of the population. Traditional Freemasons played a particularly important role in the fight against the order, fearing that the anti-Illuminati campaign would also affect their organizations. Seeking to distance themselves from the radical order, many Masonic lodges began to expel those suspected of sympathizing with the Illuminati and publicly condemn their activities. The coordination of actions against the order was carried out through diplomatic channels and the church hierarchy. The papal nuncio in Munich regularly informed Rome about the progress of the repression against the Illuminati, and the Vatican, in turn, put pressure on Catholic governments to take similar measures. A kind of anti-Illuminati league of European monarchs and church hierarchs was formed. The resistance of the united forces of the Old Order proved too powerful for the secret society, no matter how noble its goals were and how much support its ideas enjoyed among the educated classes of society. 1784 was a fateful year for the Bavarian Illuminati. What began as local repression against a small group of freethinkers grew into a Europe-wide campaign to eradicate secret societies and suppress the Enlightenment movement. The events of that year put an end to the 11-year history of an organization that dreamed of changing the face of Europe through the power of reason and enlightenment. The turning point came when the Bavarian authorities obtained documents seized during a search of the estate of one of the order's leaders. On July 15, 1784, the police conducted a thorough search of the home of advisor Zwack in the village of Sandersdorf. Hundreds of letters, plans, membership lists, and instructions were found in a hiding place, completely revealing the structure, goals, and methods of the secret society. The contents of the documents exceeded the authorities' worst expectations. Plans to infiltrate government institutions, lists of recruited officials, instructions on how to collect compromising material on influential figures, and schemes for financing subversive activities all testified to the scale of the conspiracy against the existing order. The rulers were particularly outraged by plans to overthrow monarchies and establish a republican system throughout Europe. On August 27, 1784, Elector Karl Theodor signed a second, tougher decree against secret societies. This document specifically named the Illuminati and declared their activities to be treason. Members of the order were ordered to report to the authorities within 8 days. Otherwise, they would face confiscation of property, deprivation of all positions and titles, imprisonment, or expulsion from the country. Repression began immediately. Mass arrests, searches, and confiscation of property took place throughout Bavaria. Dozens of members of the order were detained, including several high-ranking officials, university professors, and judges. Many suspects, not waiting for arrest, fled to neighboring countries or hid in remote villages under assumed names. Adam Weishaupt, warned by loyal friends about the impending repression, managed to leave Bavaria a few days before the second decree was issued. He found refuge at the court of Duke Ernst of Gotha in Thuringia, where he received a small pension and the opportunity to engage in literary activities. However, the founder of the order's influence on European politics was completely undermined. Baron Adolf von Knigge, who had formally broken with the Illuminati in 1782 due to disagreements with Weishaupt, was nevertheless persecuted as one of the movement's main ideologists. He was forced to publicly renounce his former views and give written assurances that he would not participate in the activities of secret societies. The third decree of the Elector, issued on August 16, 1785, tightened the penalties and extended them to anyone who provided assistance to members of the banned order. Informers received monetary rewards, and harboring Illuminati members was punished as complicity in treason. These measures finally crushed the remnants of the organization in Bavaria. The fourth and final decree, published on November 28, 1787, summed up the repressive campaign. By this time, the authorities had obtained extensive archives of the order, including secret correspondence between various branches, financial documents, and lists of agents in other countries. The publication of these materials dealt a crushing blow to the reputation of the Illuminati and discredited the Enlightenment movement itself. The repression quickly spread beyond Bavaria. In Austria, Emperor Joseph II, despite his liberal convictions, issued a decree closing suspicious Masonic lodges and banning secret meetings. In Prussia, King Frederick William II, who ascended the throne in 1786, radically changed the policy of his predecessor and began persecuting the Enlightenment thinkers. In France, where the ideas of the Illuminati enjoyed a certain amount of support among intellectuals, the government of Louis XVI also tightened control over secret societies. The French police received lists of people suspected of having ties to the Bavarian order and began surveillance of potentially dangerous elements among the aristocracy and bourgeoisie. In other European countries, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and the Italian states, local authorities also took preventive measures against the spread of the Illuminati contagion. Suspicious lodges were closed, philosophical societies were banned, and censorship of Enlightenment literature was tightened. The Church used the collapse of the Illuminati to strengthen its position. Catholic preachers declared the defeat of the order a victory of Christianity over the forces of evil and atheism. Control over university education was tightened, and many professors with liberal views were dismissed or forced to publicly repent. The material losses of the members of the order were enormous. Many lost their positions, property, and social status. Families were torn apart, careers were destroyed, and reputations were tarnished forever. Some former Illuminati fell into poverty and dependence on the charity of friends. The psychological impact of the repression was no less devastating. Idealists who dreamed of rebuilding the world on rational principles were confronted with the harsh reality of political struggle and state terror. Many became disillusioned with the possibility of peaceful reform and either withdrew from public life or became supporters of more radical methods of struggle. By the end of the 1780s, the Bavarian Illuminati had practically ceased to exist as an organized force. Individual groups of enthusiasts continued to meet in secret, but their activities were more nostalgic than practical. The great experiment to create a secret society of enlightened reformers suffered a crushing defeat. However, the ideas for which the Illuminati fought did not disappear with their organization. They continued to live on in the works of philosophers, the programs of political movements, and dreams of a better future for humanity. The history of the Bavarian Illuminati is inextricably linked to the fates of the people who stood at its origins, ensured the growth and development of the organization, and then lived through its collapse and demise. Among them were sincere idealists and cynical careerists, talented organizers and dreamy utopians, heroes ready to sacrifice everything for their beliefs, and traitors who betrayed their comrades to enemies in order to save their own skins. The central figure of the movement remained its founder, Adam Weishaupt. After fleeing Bavaria, He lived in Thuringia for another 46 years, until his death in 1830. Duke Ernst of Gotha granted him a small pension and allowed him to pursue his literary activities. During these years, Weishaupt wrote several books in which he defended the ideas of Enlightenment and criticized his opponents, but he no longer had any political influence. In exile, the founder of the order revealed a new side to his character. Deprived of power and surrounded by loyal comrades, he proved to be a bitter, vindictive man, incapable of admitting his own mistakes. In his memoirs and letters, Weishaupt blamed everyone but himself for the collapse of the organization. Nigge for betrayal and sabotage, ordinary members for cowardice and disloyalty to their ideals, and the government for blindness and reactionary attitudes. Nevertheless, the former professor's intellectual abilities remained high. His later works contain a profound analysis of the reasons for the failure of the educational project and prophetic predictions about future revolutions in Europe. Weishaupt foresaw that the ideas for which the Illuminati fought would sooner or later triumph, but that this would happen through bloody upheavals rather than peaceful reforms. The fate of Baron Adolf von Knigge, the second most important leader of the order, was completely different. After breaking with Weishaupt in 1782, he attempted to create his own organization of enlightened reformers, but failed. The repression against the Illuminati also affected him. The Baron was forced to publicly renounce his former views and give written assurances that he would not participate in secret societies. Knigge spent the last years of his life in relative obscurity, devoting himself to literary work and raising his children. He died in 1795, never seeing the triumph of the ideas to which he had devoted the best years of his life. However, his organizational talent and ability to attract people to the movement were recognized even by his opponents. The life of Franz Xaver von Zwack, one of Weishaupt's first and most devoted comrades, ended tragically. After the order was crushed, he was arrested, subjected to lengthy interrogations, stripped of all his positions and property. Zwick could not withstand the moral and physical pressure and committed suicide in 1787, leaving a letter in which he defended the righteousness of the Illuminati's ideas to the end. Count Cobenzl, an influential Austrian diplomat who secretly sympathized with the order and provided it with financial support, was more fortunate. After the repression began, he skillfully distanced himself from the Illuminati, destroyed compromising documents, and continued his career, rising to the post of Chancellor of the Austrian Empire. His involvement in the movement only became known to historians in the 20th century. Among the literary figures associated with the order, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe is the most famous. The great poet joined the Illuminati in 1782, but his involvement in the organization's activities was mostly just for show. Goethe was interested in the philosophical aspects of the teachings, not political practice. After the order was crushed, he broke with the movement without regret and focused on his creative work. Johann Gottfried Herder, a philosopher and literary critic, was also a member of the Weimar branch of the Illuminati. Unlike Goethe, he took the ideas of the order more seriously and even attempted to develop his own program for the enlightenment of the masses. After the secret societies were banned, Herder continued to develop humanistic ideas in his scientific works. A special place in the history of the order is occupied by its traitors, people who, out of fear, greed, or disappointment, betrayed the secrets of the organization to its enemies. The most famous of these was Joseph Utschneider, a minor official who was expelled from the order for embezzlement of public funds. It was his testimony to the authorities that marked the beginning of the end for the Illuminati. Utzschneider provided the Bavarian government with detailed information about the structure of the order, the names of its members, and its plans and methods of operation. For this, he received a monetary reward and forgiveness for his previous misdeeds. He went on to make a career in anti-Illuminati propaganda, publishing exposés and pamphlets. Another traitor was Kosianst Svak, a younger relative of the order's treasurer. The young man was drawn to the movement through family connections, but quickly became disillusioned with its radical ideas and secrecy. When the investigation began, he did not hesitate to testify against his former comrades, hoping to avoid punishment. The traitor's testimony was particularly valuable to the authorities, as it contained details that were not available to outside observers. It was thanks to them that investigators were able to completely reconstruct the structure of the order, identify all active participants, and understand the true scale of the conspiracy. The fate of most of the order's rank-and-file members was grim. Many lost their jobs, were expelled from universities, and lost their social status. Some emigrated to other countries, others hid under assumed names, and still others withdrew completely from public life. However, there were exceptions. Several former Illuminati members subsequently managed to build successful careers in the changed political conditions. Some became active participants in the Napoleonic reforms, while others contributed to liberal transformations in the German states after the Congress of Vienna. An analysis of the biographies of the order's leaders shows that the Illuminati movement brought together people of different characters, motives, and destinies. They were united by their belief in the possibility of rational transformation of society, but their personal qualities and life circumstances forced each of them to follow their own path. Although the Bavarian Illuminati order existed for only 11 years and was crushed by the combined forces of the Church and the monarchy, the ideas it promoted did not disappear with the organization. On the contrary, many concepts that seemed utopian and dangerous to their contemporaries gradually penetrated the public consciousness and found expression in the political programs, philosophical systems, and social movements of subsequent eras. The influence of Illuminati ideas was most clearly evident during the French Revolution of 1789. Many of the revolutionaries' slogans, equality before the law, separation of church and state, popular sovereignty, human rights, were practically verbatim repetitions of the Bavarian order's programmatic principles. This similarity gave rise to numerous theories about a direct connection between the Illuminati and the Jacobins, although historical facts do not confirm such a connection. It is more likely that both the Illuminati and the French revolutionaries drew inspiration from the same sources: the works of the philosophers of the Enlightenment, Voltaire's ideas about religious tolerance, Rousseau's concept of the social contract, and Montesquieu's theory of the separation of powers all formed the common ideological background of the era. The Illuminati merely attempted to translate these ideas into a practical program of action before anyone else did. The principle of secularization, actively promoted by the order, became widespread in Europe in the early 19th century. Napoleon's reforms in France and its dependent states provided for the confiscation of church lands, the closure of monasteries, the introduction of civil marriage, and secular education. Although Napoleon acted out of pragmatic rather than ideological considerations, the result was the same as that dreamed of by the Illuminati. The idea of European unity, which seemed like a fantastic utopia to Weishaupt's contemporaries, was also reflected in the political projects of the 19th century. The Holy Alliance of Alexander the First, Napoleon's pan-European plans, and the German unification movements. All these initiatives, despite their differences, stemmed from an understanding of the need to overcome the national fragmentation of the continent. The cosmopolitan ideas of the order influenced the formation of 19th-century liberal ideology. The principles of free trade, the movement of capital and people across national borders, and international law as the basis of interstate relations all date back to the programmatic documents of the Illuminati, although they developed under changed historical conditions. Educational reforms in European countries in the first half of the 19th century also bore the imprint of Illuminati ideas. The creation of universal secular education systems in Prussia, France, and the Netherlands involved educating citizens on the basis of scientific knowledge rather than religious dogma. Wilhelm von Humboldt's university reforms in Prussia directly followed the principles of academic freedom advocated by the Illuminati. The order's influence on the development of democratic ideas was less direct, but no less significant. The concept of popular sovereignty, the election of officials, and the accountability of the authorities to society, all these principles promoted by the Illuminati became the basis of the liberal and democratic movements of the 19th century in Germany, Italy, Poland, and other European countries. The ideas of the order had a particular influence on the development of socialist teachings. Criticism of private property, the idea of the common good as the highest goal, and the concept of the fair distribution of wealth. These elements of the Illuminati program would find development in the works of socialist utopians and later in Marxist theory. The anti-clerical orientation of the order's activities also left a noticeable mark on European history. The struggle for the separation of church and state, criticism of church land ownership, and the political influence of the clergy became permanent elements of liberal and leftist ideology. The Kulturkampf in Germany in the 1870s directly continued the line set out by the Illuminati. The intellectual legacy of the order manifested itself in the development of historical science and philosophy, the idea of human progress through education, the concept of historical development as a struggle between reason and prejudice, and the belief in the possibility of a rational explanation of social processes. All these principles, defended by the Illuminati, became the basis of positivist philosophy and the scientific approach to the study of society. The organizational principles of the order also found application in subsequent revolutionary movements. Conspiratorial methods of work, strict discipline, gradual initiation of members into the goals of the organization, and the creation of extensive agent networks. All these techniques would be used by the Carbonari, the Narodniks, the Social Democrats, and other revolutionary groups. The symbols of the Illuminati, the pyramid with the all-seeing eye, Minerva's owl, and the torch of Enlightenment, became part of the arsenal of Masonic lodges, educational societies, and liberal parties. These symbols became a visual expression of the ideas of reason, progress, and the struggle against ignorance and despotism. The literary legacy of the order, including the works of Weishaupt, Knigge, and other leaders of the movement, continued to be published and read throughout the 19th century. These works served as a source of inspiration for new generations of reformers and revolutionaries who sought to change the world through the power of reason and enlightenment. Paradoxically, even the critics of the Illuminati contributed to the spread of their ideas. Exposé literature, beginning with the works of Abbé Barré, popularized the programmatic principles of the order, albeit in a negative light. Many readers, upon encountering criticism of the Illuminati, learned for the first time about the existence of alternative political concepts. The international nature of the Order's activities also influenced the formation of European consciousness. The idea of unity among enlightened people of all nations in the struggle against obscurantism and despotism contributed to the development of cosmopolitan sentiments among the intelligentsia and the liberal bourgeoisie. Thus, despite its short existence and relative small size, the Bavarian Illuminati played a significant role in the intellectual history of Europe, becoming an intermediate link between the philosophy of the Enlightenment and the political practice of the new era. The defeat of the Bavarian Illuminati in the 1780s paradoxically marked the beginning of their second mythological life. What a real organization failed to achieve in 11 years of existence, gaining worldwide fame and influence, was easily accomplished by the fictional Illuminati in the imaginations of conspiracy theorists, writers, and political propagandists in the centuries that followed. The first conspiracy theories about the secret influence of the Illuminati appeared as early as the end of the 18th century, at the height of the French Revolution. Conservative authors, shocked by the radicalism of the Jacobins and the scale of anti-church repression, sought an explanation for what was happening in the activities of a powerful secret society. Since the Illuminati's program did indeed contain many ideas that were embodied in revolutionary France, the connection between them seemed obvious. The most influential propagandist of the Illuminati conspiracy theory was the French Jesuit abbot Augustin Barré. In his Memoirs on the History of Jacobinism, published in 1797, he claimed that the French Revolution had been planned and carried out by a secret network of Illuminati who had survived their defeat in Bavaria and continued to operate under various guises. According to Barré, the Illuminati infiltrated Masonic lodges, philosophical societies, and literary salons, gradually converting the French elite to their faith. The execution of King Louis XVI, the Jacobin Terror, and the persecution of the clergy were all allegedly elements of a premeditated plan to destroy Christian civilization and establish a republic of atheists. Barré's theories found a grateful audience among European monarchs and church hierarchs, frightened by the revolutionary upheavals. The book was translated into many languages and used as an ideological justification for the struggle against liberal and democratic movements. The very existence of a powerful secret enemy mobilized conservative forces and justified repression against dissenters. In the 19th century, the myth of a worldwide Illuminati conspiracy developed and was enriched with new details. Claims emerged that the order had not only survived its defeat in Bavaria, but had significantly expanded its activities, establishing branches in America, Russia, and other countries. Every major political event, the Napoleonic Wars, the revolutions of 1848, the unification of Italy, was explained by the secret influence of the Illuminati. Theories about the Illuminati's connection to Freemasonry and Jewish financiers became particularly popular. Anti-Semitic authors claimed that the Bavarian order was merely a cover for a Jewish conspiracy against Christian peoples, and that Masonic lodges served as instruments of this conspiracy. This gave rise to the protocols of the Elders of Zion and other forgeries that would be used by the fascist regimes of the 20th century. In the 20th century, conspiracy theories about the Illuminati gained new momentum with the creation of international organizations such as the League of Nations, the United Nations, and the European Union. Conspiracy theorists saw these structures as the embodiment of the Illuminati's long-standing plans to create a world government. Every step toward international integration was seen as part of a secret plan to enslave humanity. American conspiracy theorists developed their own versions of the Illuminati threat. They claimed that the order had infiltrated the U.S. in the 18th century through Masonic lodges and gradually seized control of the government, the banking system, and the media. The image of a pyramid with an all-seeing eye on the dollar bill was seen as proof of the Illuminati's influence on the American elite. The development of the internet and social media in the 21st century led to an explosion of conspiracy theories about the Illuminati. Claims emerged that the order controls the global economy, manipulates public opinion through the media, plans to reduce the world's population, and is preparing to establish a totalitarian world order. Popular culture has also contributed to the mythologization of the Illuminati. Dan Brown's novels, Hollywood films, and computer games have created an image of a powerful secret organization capable of influencing the course of world history. This image is far from historical reality, but it is precisely this image that shapes the general public's perception of who the Illuminati were. The music industry has spawned a special subgenre of conspiracy theories about the Illuminati's influence on pop culture. Supporters of such views see secret symbols in the music videos of popular artists, interpret the gestures and costumes of stars as signs of belonging to a secret society, and explain the success or failure of artists by their relationship with the order. Internet memes and viral videos have turned the Illuminati into an object of mass irony and parody. The phrase "Illuminati confirmed" has become a popular way of mocking conspiracy theories, and the triangle with an eye has become a recognizable symbol of internet culture. Paradoxically, it is through irony that the symbolism of the historical Illuminati has become so widespread. The commercialization of the Illuminati myth has led to the emergence of a multitude of products bearing the corresponding symbols, including t-shirts, jewelry, toys, and books. Enterprising authors publish pseudo-historical studies that supposedly reveal the secrets of the order, while internet charlatans offer to join the Illuminati for a fee. Academic science is trying to counter the mythologization of the Illuminati's history by publishing serious studies based on authentic archival documents. Historians emphasize the limited real influence of the order, the short-lived nature of its existence, and the utopian nature of its leaders' plans. However, scientific facts struggle to break through the thick layer of myths and prejudices. Psychologists explain the popularity of conspiracy theories about the Illuminati by people's need for simple explanations of complex processes. It is much easier to believe in the existence of a secret conspiracy than to understand the objective causes of economic crises, social conflicts, and political changes. The Illuminati have become a universal scapegoat for all the ills of humanity. Contemporary researchers note that the myth of the Illuminati serves an important psychological function. It provides the illusion of understanding and control over an unpredictable world. Belief in the existence of secret puppet masters of history is paradoxically reassuring, as it suggests that behind the chaos of events, there is someone's mind, albeit hostile. The irony of history is that the fictional Illuminati of the 21st century do indeed have the global influence that their historical predecessors dreamed of. However, this influence is purely symbolic and is directed not toward political transformation, but toward commercial goals and mass entertainment. Thus, conspiracy theories about the Illuminati have become an independent cultural phenomenon, living by its own rules and bearing little relation to the historical reality of the 18th century. More than 2 centuries after the defeat of the Bavarian Illuminati, many of their utopian plans have come to fruition in a completely unexpected form. The European Union, created in the second half of the 20th century, embodied the key ideas once propagated by the followers of Adam Weishaupt: the unification of the continent, the overcoming of national borders, the secularization of society, and the creation of supranational institutions of power. Of course, there is no direct link between the historical Illuminati and the creators of modern Europe. Jean Monnet, Robert Schuman, Konrad Adenauer, and other fathers of European integration acted out of practical considerations of the post-war period, not out of philosophical concepts of the 18th century. However, the similarity between the basic principles and long-term goals is so striking that it deserves detailed analysis. The idea of overcoming the national fragmentation of Europe was central to the Illuminati's program. They saw the existence of many warring states as the main cause of wars, economic backwardness, and cultural isolation of peoples. The creation of a single European space was supposed to ensure peace, prosperity, and the free exchange of ideas between different regions of the continent. The European Union arose from similar premises, albeit under different historical conditions. After two devastating world wars, European politicians came to the conclusion that mechanisms were needed to make new conflicts impossible. Economic integration, which began with the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951, gradually developed into a political union. The principle of secularization, actively promoted by the Illuminati, was also reflected in the structure of the European Union. Although many member states retain state churches and religious traditions, the supranational institutions of the EU are built on secular foundations. The European Constitution, adopted in 1992, contains no references to the Christian heritage, which has sparked protests from church circles. The economic principles of the Illuminati, free trade, the abolition of customs barriers, and a single currency system, became the cornerstones of European integration. The common market created within the EU ensures the free movement of goods, services, capital, and people on a scale that the Bavarian conspirators could only dream of. The introduction of the euro in 1999 realized the Illuminati's long-standing plan to create a single European currency. The unification of the monetary system not only facilitated trade, but also became a symbol of European unity, a visible manifestation of supranational identity. The cosmopolitan ideals of the order found expression in the concept of European citizenship, introduced by the Maastricht Treaty. Citizens of EU countries gained the right to move, work, and live freely anywhere in the Union, blurring traditional national borders and contributing to the formation of a pan-European identity. The Illuminati's educational program, which envisaged the creation of a pan-European university system, has been partially implemented through the Bologna process. The unification of degrees, mutual recognition of diplomas, and academic exchange programs contribute to the formation of a single educational space and the education of generations of Europeans with a cosmopolitan worldview. The institutional structure of the European Union also shows similarities with the plans of the Illuminati. The European Commission as a supranational executive body, the European Parliament as an elected representative body of the peoples, and the Council of Europe as a body for intergovernmental cooperation, all these institutions embody the idea of governance based on reason and competence rather than dynastic rights or national prejudices. The principle of subsidiarity, which is at the heart of European law, is in line with the Illuminati's ideas about the rational distribution of powers between different levels of government. Decisions are made at the level where they can be implemented most effectively, ensuring a balance between unity and diversity. European monetary policy aimed at maintaining price stability and long-term economic growth, reflects the Illuminati's ideas about rational economic management based on scientific principles rather than political considerations or traditional prejudices. The European Union's foreign policy, based on the principles of multilateralism, international law, and peaceful conflict resolution, is also in line with Illuminati ideals. The concept of soft power and the spread of European values through economic cooperation and cultural exchange are reminiscent of the methods of silent revolution advocated by Weishaupt. The eastward expansion of the European Union after the end of the Cold War can be seen as the realization of a long-standing plan to unite the entire continent under the umbrella of common values and institutions. Although this process faces serious difficulties, the general direction of development is consistent with the Illuminati's vision of the future of Europe. Critics of European integration often use arguments similar to those put forward against the Illuminati in the 18th century. Accusations of undermining national sovereignty, eroding traditional values, and creating a technocratic dictatorship were all heard 2.5 centuries ago. However, there are fundamental differences between the Illuminati's plans and the reality of the European Union. The Bavarian Order thought in terms of revolutionary transformation, while European integration is developing in an evolutionary way. The Illuminati counted on the activities of an enlightened elite, while the EU is based on democratic principles and takes into account the opinions of broad sections of the population. The religious factor also plays a different role. While the Illuminati openly oppose the influence of the Church, the creators of modern Europe seek a compromise between secular and religious values. Christian democratic parties play a leading role in European politics, and many EU initiatives have Christian roots. Nevertheless, the general direction of European civilization corresponds to the main goals set by the Illuminati: rationalization of the political system, secularization of public life, cosmopolitanization of culture, and the creation of supranational forms of government. Perhaps it would be most accurate to say that the European Union is a compromise version of the Illuminati utopia, the implementation of their ideas in a more moderate and democratic form, taking into account the lessons of history and the needs of the modern world. Summing up the history of the Bavarian Illuminati, we encounter a paradoxical phenomenon. An organization that existed for only 11 years and had no more than 3,000 members at its peak had an influence on European and world history that was incomparable to its actual size. This influence manifested itself not so much in direct political action as in the spread of ideas that shaped the development of Western civilization for centuries to come. The real achievements of the historical Illuminati were quite modest. During their 11 years of existence, they created an extensive network of like-minded people in the German lands, infiltrated several Masonic lodges, published a number of philosophical treatises, and attracted several prominent cultural figures to the movement. However, their plans for the revolutionary transformation of Europe remained on paper, and their attempts to influence government policy ended in complete failure. Nevertheless, the ideological legacy of the order proved to be extremely resilient and influential. The principles of secularization, European integration, democratic rule, religious tolerance, and a scientific approach to social problems, all these concepts promoted by the Illuminati gradually became the foundation of modern European civilization. The modern assessment of the order's activities differs radically from the views of its contemporaries. While in the 18th century the Illuminati were perceived as dangerous conspirators threatening the foundations of social order. Today, historians see them as precursors of the liberal and democratic movements of the 19th and 20th centuries. The idea of European unity, which seemed like a utopian fantasy to Weishaupt's contemporaries, has now been realized in the European Union, a supranational organization uniting 27 countries with a population of about 450 million people. The principles of free trade, movement of people and capital, and a common currency system have become a reality, albeit in forms different from those proposed by the Bavarian conspirators. The secularization of European society has also taken place, albeit gradually, without the revolutionary upheavals feared by the church hierarchy of the 18th century. The separation of church and state, religious tolerance, and secular education became the norm in most developed countries, in line with the Illuminati's program. The democratic principles of government that the order promoted during the age of absolutism are now the universally recognized standard of political organization in the Western world. The idea of popular sovereignty, the election of officials, and the accountability of government to society has gone from being a heretical doctrine of a secret society to the foundation of international law. The scientific approach to solving social problems advocated by the Illuminati has also become an integral part of modern governance. Economic policy based on statistical data and mathematical models, social programs developed with scientific research in mind, and environmental policy based on natural science data, all these principles go back to the Enlightenment belief in the power of human reason. The educational ideals of the order have also found expression in modern systems of universal secular education. Universities based on the principles of academic freedom and critical thinking, international student exchange programs, and scientific research as the basis of teaching all correspond to the Illuminati's ideas about how the masses should be educated. However, the modern perception of the Illuminati is complicated by a powerful tradition of conspiracy theories that have turned the historical organization into a symbol of a secret world conspiracy. Popular culture has created an image of an all-powerful order controlling world politics and economics from the shadows, which has nothing to do with the reality of the 18th century. This mythologization makes it difficult to objectively assess the historical significance of the Bavarian Illuminati. Many serious researchers avoid the topic for fear of being labeled conspiracy theorists, while the general public gets a distorted view of the order from works of fiction and internet memes. Academic historiography in recent decades has sought to overcome these stereotypes by presenting the Illuminati as a typical secret society of the Enlightenment, no more or less influential than other similar organizations. The limitations of their real influence on political processes and the utopian nature of many of their plans are emphasized. At the same time, historians recognize the order's importance as an intermediate link between the philosophy of the Enlightenment and the practical politics of the new era. The Illuminati were the first to attempt to organize Enlightenment ideas and develop specific programs for their implementation, making them the precursors of modern political parties and social movements. Contemporary democratic institutions, international organizations, education and social security systems embody many of the principles promoted by the Illuminati, albeit in a significantly altered form. This allows us to consider the order as one of the ideological precursors of modern Western civilization. A critical analysis of the Illuminati's activities is also important for understanding the limitations and contradictions of the Enlightenment project. The elitism of the organization, its authoritarian methods of leadership, and its willingness to use deception and intrigue to achieve noble goals all show that even the most progressive movements carry within them the seeds of the problems they seek to combat. The legacy of the Illuminati remains relevant today, as humanity faces global challenges such as climate change, international terrorism, economic inequality, and technological risks. The search for rational solutions to these problems, the creation of effective international institutions, and public education are all tasks that echo the goals set by the Bavarian conspirators more than 2 centuries ago. Perhaps the main lesson of the Illuminati's history is that great ideas have a way of outliving the organizations that gave birth to them, and taking forms that their creators could not have foreseen. The dream of a united, enlightened, peaceful Europe has become a reality, albeit not in the form envisioned by Adam Weishaupt's followers. Ultimately, the Bavarian Illuminati can be seen as one of many episodes in the long history of humanity's quest for perfection. A quest that, despite all its failures and defeats, continues to drive civilization forward.